Thank you all so much for coming. I'm delighted to see you all here. It's dreary out there, but it's not at all dreary in here. It's very happy in here. This is a double celebration, although a little bit of a triple-ish celebration, I'm just going to say, because that's what you'll see. The first part is a celebration of BLSA, and the second part is a celebration of Congressman Donald McEachin. So I'll start with BLSA, without whose energy we would not be sitting here right now. BLSA was founded at UVA in 1970, although not formally chartered, I didn't know this, until 1996. And BLSA, as I think all of you know, is dedicated to the development of talented, involved, and diverse attorneys in the legal profession. Our chapter is an incredibly active BLSA chapter. It sponsors student support programs, community outreach projects, panel discussions, receptions, allyship events, and our chapter is one of the leading chapters in the national organization. I say this with incredible pride. We have been recognized You have been recognized as Regional Chapter of the Year 7 times, including most recently 2 weeks ago. So let's hear it for the Regional Chapter. And National Chapter of the Year 4 times. So I doubt there is any BLSA chapter out there with this many accolades that it has racked up. And the success that BLSA has is a product of its never being at rest, always be on the lookout for new innovations, new events like this one, how to make the school a better school for everyone, how to make the profession a more diverse and equitable profession. 2 weeks ago, the law school hosted a commemoration of Gregory Swanson, who was the first African-American law student at UVA, and he was also the first African-American student anywhere at UVA in 1950, and he had never really been publicly recognized by the university, and we had a commemoration, and BLSA came to me and said, what can we do for this commemoration? And we talked about it, and I said, what do you want to do? And they said, we want to host a reception beforehand for the BLSA alumni who are coming back. And I thought, that's fabulous, and that's exactly the kind of thing that our BLSA chapter does, is say there's something happening, we should be involved in it, we should improve upon it. They held a beautiful reception. And a number of our BLSA alumni came back for the event, and it was beautiful to see the intergenerational conversations and fellowship that went on as a result of their reception. And our BLSA alumni base is incredibly strong. Some of our BLSA alumni are back today, and the strength of both the current chapter and the alumni base are a huge part of the strength of our connections between past, present, and future here at the law school. So that brings me to tonight's honoree for the inaugural BLSA Alumni Spotlight Award. There were so many impressive alumni from whom to choose, some of whom are here tonight. But it is A. Donald McEachin, class of '86, and here's where the third honor part of the evening comes in. He met his wife, Colette McEachin, here at the law school. He's class of '86, she's class of '85. Older woman, or at least more senior. I don't know older, but more senior, more advanced and experienced. There she goes. And Ms. McEachin has extensive legal experience. She is presently working in the Richmond City Commonwealth's Attorney Office, and we are so proud of this power couple. And, you know, I've said congressman now a few times, so you know he's a congressman, but my husband, I don't know about power couple, but we too are both in the law, and he studies local government law, and I think he would be the first to say, you're at the right level of government, and the more important level of government than the national level. But Congressman McEachin grew up in the Richmond area, and he has not strayed far from his childhood, either geographically or in his approach to the world. And he, in fact, grew up in what is now the Congressional District that he represents. He learned the value of hard work and community from his parents. His father was an Army veteran, and his mother was a public school teacher. He graduated from American University with a degree in political science before coming to the law school, and he also holds a Master's of Divinity degree from the Samuel Project Proctor Theological Seminary at Virginia Union University. He has spent a lot of time in private practice in Richmond, most prominently and recently with McEachin and Gee, and he has also spent a very long time, 20 years, as a legislator in state government. So between the two of you, you really have local, state, federal service that you can talk about. I'm sure there are lots of interesting conversations about what level of government is the right level of government to take on a particular problem. He served first in the Virginia House of Delegates and then in the Virginia State Senate. He was elected by Senate Democrats to serve as Senate Democratic Caucus Chair in 2011. He's also a very active member of the community, a lifetime member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, the NAACP, the Virginia State Bar, and the Virginia Trial Lawyers Association, as well as serving on several other boards and commissions in service to the community. So as you can tell from my Congressman. In 2016, he was elected to represent the 4th District of Virginia in the United States House of Representatives. He is already making his mark there. He represents his district on the House Armed Services Committee, the House Committee on Natural Resources. He's also appointed by House leadership to serve on the Franking Commission. He was also elected to serve as co-president of the freshman class, appointed as regional whip, and serves as a member of the leader's environmental messaging team. If you've had any chance to interact with Congressman McEachin, you will not be surprised that he is already playing such a leadership role in Congress as Delegate Jennifer McClellan, UVA class of 1997, and also in the Virginia General Assembly with Congressman McEachin has said, quote, he's a natural leader when he sees something that needs to get done, even as a minority member. She has lots of other nice things to say about him, too. Congressman McEachin, throughout his time as a public servant, has fought to protect our most vulnerable citizens and those in need. He has protected and worked for students in the public schools, people living in poverty or with food insecurity, veterans, victims of gun violence, among many others. His legislative work has earned him praise from across the political spectrum. He's won awards from groups as diverse as the Virginia Sheriff's Association, the Virginia Education Association, and the UFCW Minority Coalition. I will leave additional praise to the award presentation after Congressman McEachin's speech, but for now, I just want to say how proud we are that you are an alumnus of the law school, how proud we are that Ms. McEachin, you are an alumna of the law school. Your service, your leadership, your commitment to the common welfare and our deepest aspirations as a nation and a profession is a model for us all. We are honored to welcome you, and we are honored to honor you. Thank you.
Well, good evening. It is a thrill to be back here and to see so many faces that sort of look like ours, except y'all don't have gray hair, and I feel like I've always had this gray hair. First of all, I want to give a shout out to my classmate, Justice Bernard Goodwin. He is the reason I was able to finish the law school, because I think the statute of limitations is run, but he actually let me look on his paper so I could get out of here. So Bernard and his lovely wife Sharon, class of 1988. Good to see you both. You call her Professor, we call her Dana Matthews. Good to see you. She was a year behind us, right? Class of 87? Yeah. Class of 87. And of course, I have to give a huge shout out to my wife of now in November 30 years, y'all. Give her a hand clap. I know you don't call it this anymore, but we actually met in the Blue Parrot Lounge right out here in the hallway, and my life has been blessed ever since, and that's the story I'm sticking with. But it's been a joy. We have 3 children, and as the last group heard me say, a prosecutor is exactly who you want raising your children. There are no shades of gray. There are consequences for your actions. Everything's black and white, and to that end, they all have graduated from school, they all have jobs, and they all have jobs with benefits. So I thought what I would do, and Madam President, I'm going to ask you to just make sure that I don't go over too long, but I thought what I would do is share with you a little bit about my story, about getting into the Congress and some of the challenges that I see for those who want to go to Congress, and then do some questions and answers, because I think that's my favorite part of any group setting, is to try to wrestle with the questions that may be on y'all's minds. And so my journey starts in Nuremberg, Germany. I was born in 1961. I would spend some time in Virginia after that, but my memory really starts in Vicenza, Italy, which is a little hole in the Adriatic coast of Italy. And as I told the last class, it definitely left a mark. Donald Duck was an Italian, and nowhere, and I know this to be true because I looked far and long, nowhere in Italy in the 1960s was there a Coca-Cola. They give you all the wine you want, and to this day, I promise you, because I have no real reason not to drink alcohol, it's just that I don't drink, right? Because I was so focused on looking for Coca-Colas and Pepsis that when I got back to the States, that's just what I stuck with. But it was there that I actually believe that my passion for public service began, because like most children, we're an inquisitive lot, and we ask a lot of questions, and we're like, well, why do we have to move? Why are we doing this? What are we doing this for? And my parents would try to teach me about NATO, and so I'm like, well, why are we in NATO? And then they still talk about the presidency and Congress, and I'm like, well, what do you have to do to be a congressman? Now remember, this is the 1960s, and so they say, well, you have to be a lawyer. I'm like, you mean like Perry Mason? Perry Mason was this lawyer on TV who never lost a case. He had Della Scott, his aide, and his Paul, his investigator, and they never lost a case that whole time. I'm like, I can do that. And so my course was set early on to be a lawyer and to go into public service. I'd like to believe that my thought process matured over time, but certainly the seeds of that process were planted in Vicenza, Italy in the early 60s. So I would go through school. I graduated from American University, came here to the law school. Awesome 3 years here. Obviously met Colette, made some great friends. Alex and Mildred actually gave me decent grades. So I got out, I was able to get employed. And I actually started with a law firm called Browder, Russell, Morris, and Butcher, doing insurance defense work, the very opposite of what I would end up doing. I was a State Farm defense attorney, and I loved it. It was an awesome, awesome job. And then Colette and I got married in 1988, and we are attracted to each other, so our first child starts coming in 1989. And it's just a fact, dear. You know, I actually came to the law school saying I wasn't going to marry a lady lawyer, right? But it's been beautiful, and yeah, I'm going to stop there before I get in trouble. Bernard and Sharon know a lot of the stories, but I think they're going to just stay in-house for now. And so our first child is on the way, and I'm down in Blackstone, Virginia, coming back. When I'm not coming back yet. I'm doing a deposition. I get a phone call from one of my buddies, a guy named David Corrigan, who says, you got to get back here. You got to get back here. And so I'm flying up the road. I'm getting a speeding ticket. I'm going through toll booths. And I get back, and the law firm has decided to dissolve itself. I'm like, okay, this is a shock to me, because my generation was able to see their parents work at one place for 20, 30 years. My dad was an Army officer, then went to work for the phone company. My mom was a school teacher. One job, pension, out the door you go, right? Retirement. And now my law firm is breaking up. There's a child on the way. And Colette used to laugh at me about this saying, but I said, I can do bad by myself, right? And so while I would go off with one of the spin-offs of that law firm, I ended up actually starting my own law firm, McEachin and G, in 1990. Ironically, we would also start off doing insurance defense work, and then as that work dried up, we were blessed enough to be able to transition into doing plaintiff's work, which is I'm sorry to anyone in here who might feel differently, you're just wrong. Plaintiff's work is the best work of all. It's just amazing. Actually representing individuals and trying to get them a measure of justice is a wonderful, wonderful process. And so we, and as it turned out, that was a lot of situations that seemed messy and stormy at first. That was a real blessing, because if I was going to be able to run for office, I would have eventually had to have left my law firm that I was at, because most law firms have a lobbying practice. Most law firms want you to do billable hours of a certain amount, and none of that is necessarily jives with a career in politics. And so it was going to happen anyway, I suspect, and this just sort of moved the needle faster than I expected it to happen. And so it's 1991, and I'm living in South Richmond, and I run for office, and I get beat bad. Horrible, horrible. I got beat like 60-40, and that's probably being generous, so it's probably worse than that. And one of the lessons, and there's nothing like losing an election. That is just the worst feeling in the world, right? I mean, I'm laying on the couch, I can't move, I'm paralyzed, and all my dreams are dashed. But the one thing that you learn from that is that your wife still loves you the next day. Lord knows the children still need you to get up the next day, and you got to go to work. So you found a way to keep pushing on, and that's an invaluable, invaluable lesson. At least it was for me. The other lesson I learned was it was time to move, because I could put 40, 50 people in the street going door to door for me, but they were all from North Richmond. I'm living in South Richmond. They're all my mother's friends, my dad's friends. And so, much to Colette's chagrin, because we were living near all the really great malls in Richmond at that time, she consented. We packed up and moved to what I call home, Henrico County. I sat out an election cycle, and then the next election cycle, 1995, I ran in another Democratic primary and pulled off what was considered, and it was an upset, pulled off an upset, beating the House Appropriations Chair in a Democratic primary, and my career began. I served in the House from 1995 to 2001, and everybody knows who Mark Warner is, and he ran for governor in 2001, right? And the Tim Kaine ran for lieutenant governor in 2001. But unless you cheated and did some research before coming in here today, you don't have a clue as to who the Attorney General nominee was. And that's because it was me. And I got the silver medal that year, not the gold. And so I'm out of politics for 4 years. And here's the first place I want to stop with you for a moment and suggest to you that that was a wonderful, wonderful loss, because I didn't really understand what I was doing. And here's why I say that. A wise man once told me that if you're going to get into this political arena, you need to have something that's your own. And what he meant by that is you need to have a certain economic independence. And so I had that by starting the law firm. And that certain economic independence I want to suggest to you is critical, because there are so many temptations out there. There are so many bad things that can happen to you because you are in a desperate situation, and you end up doing stupid stuff like keeping cash in your refrigerator and doing all sorts of wacky stuff because you're just trying to make ends meet. You've gotten yourself out there, you've gotten to that dream job that you wanted, and now you're finding out that the finances just don't work and you've got a problem. Colette and I have this, Colette's been very kind to adopt and incorporate what my parents put into me, because I was an only child. My parents always told me, do for yours what was done for you. And so I went through American University debt-free. I went to a private school before that. Like I told the last class, when Daddy found out that I got into UVA Law School and that's where I was going, he took a look at the tuition. He remembered the tuition from my high school, and this tuition was lower. He went out and bought 2 Cadillacs, I promise you, in celebration, and still sent me here, and I was able to get out of here debt-free. I know those days are over, right? I get it. Your tuition's a lot more than it was back in those days. But my point is that I wanted to do the same for my children, and I would not have been able to do that on the salary of an attorney general. I can understand, and look, I'm about to talk about Bob McDonnell for a second. I believe he's innocent. I believe the court did the right thing, all that. But I also believe, and I've seen the evidence, that Bob faced some temptations. As you know, he was our governor before Terry McAuliffe. 5 children. He's the only one working and trying to do things for them. He faced awful, awful temptations and got himself into some jams that he otherwise probably would not have done. My point is this, folks, if you're going to do this, you've got to be in a position to afford it. I'm sorry that that's the way of the world, but if you're not willing to make the sacrifices necessary, I didn't say you have to be wealthy. Remember that. I didn't say you have to be wealthy. I said you have to be willing to sacrifice to get into these positions. If you're not willing to make those financial sacrifices, then you don't need to be in the business, because something's going to reach out and grab you and bite you. And I was just blessed that I lost that election, really, because I could not have done that on an attorney general's salary. In fact, but for the fact that my youngest daughter was graduating from college the same year that this congressional seat opened up, I wouldn't have been able to run for Congress either, because that particular child cost more than her 2 siblings combined to go to school. So she was a particular challenge. But she's got a job and she's got benefits, daggone it. She just doesn't understand that she is our retirement plan. That's the real deal. But we'll break that news to her later. And so the other wonderful thing that happened to me is that during that time in the wilderness, as it were, I found my way to seminary. There were things happening in our family life that I wanted to be able to have conversations with my children at the kitchen table. I had and continue to have a fine pastor, but there were some things that you just want to be able to talk to your children about from a theological perspective. Another thing, and I may be getting ready to step on some toes, but that's all right. You all will have permission to push back in just a minute when I shut up. The other thing that I found fortunate in that journey was that I was able to label the problem that I saw with the General Assembly. Sometimes you need some more education before you can figure out what it is that was nagging you about your service in the General Assembly. And what was nagging me about my service in the General Assembly was that the General Assembly was, and to a lesser degree today, is still captured by what I call empire theology. It is a theology that uses Scripture, whatever that holy writ that you might read, it uses Scripture to constrain people, to stop people from being the children of God they were meant to be. I could only know that by going to, I didn't know I was doing this at the time, I ended up in the hotbed of the religious left. I didn't even know there was a religious left when I went to seminary. But Virginia Union is the hotbed of the religious left. And there I discovered the notion of liberation theology, a theology that says God's word is meant to enhance your life. God's word is meant to give you the freedom to be the person that God wants you to be. And that is a completely different perspective for me. But it enabled me to label the problem that I saw. And also, and this is a little bit embarrassing to admit, but it also gave me an anchor that I didn't have during the first part of my political career. I went into seminary in 2005, and as I shared with the last class, I like to say that God has jokes. Because in 2005, it was also the year, and I didn't know this was going to happen, that I would go back to the House of Delegates. Now, that's not to suggest that I am God's agent or that I always get things right. It's just to suggest that God has jokes, because now he's sending me to seminary at the same time that I'm going back to the legislature. It was there in seminary, when I would go into the 2007 election cycle, that I was really being exposed to this notion of creation care. Because if I'm honest with you, and I'm transparent with you, I have to admit that I was agnostic about the environment before going to seminary. I mean, I had some votes here, I had some votes there, but I didn't really have an orientation about the environment. And so it was in seminary that I began to be exposed to creation care, and so that's sort of happening in the spiritual, right? And then in the natural, there's this woman who's just totally ticked off with the person I'm running against for state senate. And she is walking with me in the sunshine, in the heat, getting my petition signed. She is out there, in the rain, getting my petition signed. She ends up knowing Colette's birthday, how many children we have. I know her story. And she is just all up in my ear about the environment. It is the only thing she cares about, and particularly the James River, right? But she is all in my ear about the environment. And it was just a wonderful synergy was happening in my life. And so I have tried since then to be the very best environmental legislator that I know how to be. It was a steep learning curve, learning about renewable energies, learning about externalities, and now going and serving on natural resources. And I drive my staff crazy, but we're worried about critters and parks and things like that. But it's expanded my view of the environment in such a way, and I like to consider it a healthy way, that I'm really pleased and happy with the progress that at least I've made personally in the environmental movement. One of the questions that is usually posed to me is, what is the biggest challenge for a legislator? Obviously, I have the lens of an African American male, so I can only tell you what my challenge was, my biggest challenge. But the biggest challenge for me is getting out of the box. And what do I mean by that? If you let the media, and it's nothing about the institution of the legislature, it's the media, it's perception. If you let the media define you, they will come to me all day long and twice on Sundays to talk about criminal justice reform, civil rights, all of that. I am a proud, proud, proud child of the African diaspora. I am proud to be descendant from people who were strong enough to endure the hardships of the Middle Passage, both mentally and physically, and to endure slavery. However, there's more to me than that. And so while I have strong opinions about criminal justice reform, while I have strong opinions about civil rights, I have equally strong opinions about the environment. I have equally strong opinions about national defense. I have equally strong opinions about how we treat our military and how we treat our veterans. And so being able to get outside that box and getting folks to talk to you about other issues, I think is the biggest challenge. And I'm not here to suggest to you that one particular group doesn't have that challenge over the other. I'm sure all people come with that same challenge of getting outside the box so that people see you as the multidimensional person that you are. But that is a particular challenge, I think, for people of color, because they're going to assume if you're Asian, they're going to talk to you about immigration. If you're African American, they're going to want to talk to you about civil rights and criminal justice reform. We have done, and I owe it to my staff, we've done yeoman's work in getting attention on our office about our environmental positions, which I think is the most important issue of the 21st century. It is you name the issue, it covers it. It is a civil rights issue. It is a justice issue. It's an issue that will define how our children and our children's children live for the balance of this century. It's the issue that we absolutely cannot afford to get wrong. And we've been able to have some success in getting some attention and getting our views out on that. But it's hard work, because the media does not believe in coming to asking African American men about the environment, at least not at my age. Now, you younger folks, you guys, which I told the last class, y'all are going to fix everything. I'm absolutely convinced of it, because y'all have the right attitude. And you all may not have that same challenge, but the challenge for me was getting outside the box. So, as I said, the congressional opportunity opened up in 2015, ironically, behind a lawsuit. Bobby Scott, who's the congressman from the 3rd Congressional District, used to represent basically everything from Newport News to Richmond. And the court ruled that the district had been gerrymandered in such a way as to minimize the ability of African Americans to be able to influence elections in other districts. And so after giving the legislature a chance to cure, they drew the lines themselves. Ironically, neither Bobby nor I have a majority-minority district, but we're both in Congress, which is a testament to Virginia we got elected in 2016 and 2016. And we'll work hard and raise the money necessary to get reelected, but we feel like that's a better than even proposition that we'll be reelected in 2018 as well. Now, don't go tell anybody that, because I still have money to raise, okay? Delete that from the camera, please. Thank you. But so that's a little bit about my journey. That's a little bit about how I got here. But let's wrestle with some of your questions. What's on y'all's minds? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Dolphin. I'm a 2L here.
And where are you from?
I'm from Hampton, Virginia.
Hampton, all right.
Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciated hearing your story. My question has to do with being a champion of all people versus being a champion of people who look like you. You just said that neither you nor Representative Scott has majority-minority districts. How did you go about making sure that your branding was such that you didn't get pigeonholed to certain people who look like you, or certain people who were just minorities in general, and making sure that you could set the platform as you wanted?
I will try to speak for Bobby a little bit, but Bobby has most of his political career, well, let me rephrase that. Bobby, in the beginning of his political career, was elected from districts that were majority districts. So he's never had to have to worry about overcoming that. And I can't really speak to the political dynamics that led to that, other than he's obviously an outstanding legislator and an outstanding campaigner. For me, if there are 200,000 people in a Senate district, there are roughly 750 to 800,000 people in a congressional district. I had the advantage of having about 150,000 of my constituents drawn into the new 4th Congressional District. I had the added advantage of being, as one Richmond Circuit judge said, much to his chagrin, he was a UVA Law graduate, that I was the first UVA lawyer to advertise on TV, right? So McEachin and G had elevated my profile in other areas outside of the district. And so I had very good name recognition, to be honest with you. And so those things helped. I'd already sort of branded myself both through my legislative service and through my law practice. And so those things helped me overcome any challenges with that. But the reality is that both districts, although not majority minority, are very democratic. I got 58% of the vote. Hillary got 58% of the vote in my district, so that makes us like a plus 16. I don't know how they come up with those numbers, but that makes it like a D plus 16 district. And so, the challenge is getting the nomination and then moving forward and making sure you don't screw up the general. Does that answer your question?
Almost. I primarily meant being a champion for all people as it relates to, convincing not only white counterparts, but also anyone you would encounter along your journey that doesn't necessarily think like you, the mechanisms, the ways in which you would try to persuade and convince and show through example that stereotypes.
So it's amazing. It's an amazing thing, and I can share this with you because I've seen the polling data, my own personal polling data on what people believe, right? If people like you, they assume that you think like they think. They do, because how else could they possibly like you? And so because I was able to have a likable persona in the greater Richmond area, most people in Richmond think that I think like them. And I probably do think like the majority, in all honesty. But I didn't have to do much persuasion in the campaign sense because I had 20 years or nearly 20 years in the legislature of being in the newspapers, 25 years of being a TV lawyer and, painting yourself in the best light possible. So all those things helped me not have to do that from scratch. I didn't have that challenge of having to do that from scratch.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Lee, and I'm from the Midlothian Chesterfield area.
All right. Almost home.
And
Don't tell me you remember my commercials when you were in like 5th grade, okay?
Yeah.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
But my question really is, being in the Richmond area for so long and for so much of your career, how have you noticed the change in, I guess, the Richmond area politics or in the demographics of Richmond and how Richmond's sort of been leading or trending?
So when you say Richmond, I'm going to talk about Metro Richmond, okay? One of the best kept secrets about Henrico County is that outside of Northern Virginia, it is the county with the most students, let me make sure I get this right, students in K through 12 that have English as a second language. So think about, that's not your grandfather's Henrico County. That's a Henrico County that's morphing into something different, and you've seen that in terms of the election results. I mean, I've been there long enough to go from the Democratic Committee being able to meet in a phone booth to the Democratic Committee having to meet in an auditorium like this. And so, and you've seen the transition because of the demographic changes that you talk about. And it's happening in your home county of Chesterfield, right? We just saw that for the first time since 1961, a Democratic governor carried Chesterfield County. Now, it wasn't by a lot, it wasn't a landslide, but that's, it never starts like that, right? It always is a little chip away, chip away, chip away. And so I don't know all the particulars of the demographics in Chesterfield County, but I know that Chesterfield is starting to look more like Richmond and Henrico than the Chesterfield of old days. Yes, sir.
My name is Elijah. I'm from New York. I wanted to say thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us and
Sure.
answer questions. And I wanted to ask you, how do you reconcile the incentives you face that all politicians face in this country in terms of political economy with actually going out and accomplishing the meaningful and substantive life-changing work that you set out to do in your career?
Tell me what you mean by political economy.
Just the incentives that politicians face that sometimes seem counterintuitive or nonsensical. Like, say a politician inherits a budget deficit, they can either cut spending and raise taxes and handle the deficit, or they could, raise spending and lower taxes, which will make their constituents happy, but will do nothing to address the budget deficit. And the fiscally responsible action is what angers their constituents, and maybe they have a tough time getting reelected. So I want to ask, how you deal with things like that you deal with in your day-to-day, and reconcile out actually accomplishing the things that you set out to do.
Well, you try to remember, this is going to be horribly, horribly pejorative, but I believe that my party does a better job of that because we have a basic belief that government is supposed to work. And so that's why you can see a Bill Clinton come into office and raise taxes, even though he knows he's going to lose the midterms, to retire debt, because he knows that's the fiscally responsible and policy-wise thing to do. That's why you can have a Barack Obama come in and say, you know what, I've got both chambers, I'm going to go ahead and get universal health care, even though it might cost me in the midterms. I almost never see that type of reaction out of the other side, right? The reason why they're going to lose the midterms this year is because of the orange guy in the White House, right? I mean, he's just a gift that just doesn't stop giving. It's an amazing thing. And so the anger, and we will win despite ourselves. Don't let any Democrat tell you that we're winning this election because we're so great. We are Democrats. We are perfectly capable of screwing things up. But the anger that's out there and the wave that's starting to build is what's going to get us over the top. It's going to be the citizens of this country that put us back in power, not our genius. And it'll be our challenge, and I think we're up to the challenge to govern wisely. And so because of that sort of difference in viewpoint, I think we don't have as big a challenge with that issue as some of our Republican colleagues do. Because how do you explain a party that's supposed to be fiscally responsible doing what they just did, right? Not only did they take $1.5 trillion and give it to the wealthiest Americans and give us a deficit to start with, then they put together a budget plan that does another $1.5 trillion, being generous. So that's at least $3 trillion in debt. And again, that's being generous on that side. This is the party that's supposed to be fiscal hawks. This is the party that's supposed to be national defense hawks. None of them are really wailing on the president for allowing Russia to continue to attack us as they have through the election process. So, it's been a disappointing thing to see in the other side. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where your question took me.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Alicia Penn. I'm from Chesapeake, Virginia.
My part of Chesapeake or Bobby Scott's part of Chesapeake?
Western Branch, so.
You don't know who your congressman is, do you? All right, we're going to answer the question anyway.
My question is just what your favorite part of the job is.
Oh, wow, there's so much. The interaction with my colleagues, wrestling with public policy issues, forums like this. But I think the best part of it is constituent service, because when you actually get the system to work for somebody, right? Where's Eldon? There's Eldon Burton, my district director back there. Y'all need to give him a hand clap. When Eldon and his staff can get a call, on Tuesday, and somebody says, I forgot all about my visa and I'm leaving on Wednesday or Thursday, and we make it happen for them, that's a good feeling. when somebody, isn't getting their disability checked the way they're supposed to, or veterans not being dealt with by the VA the way they're supposed to, and we can start the process of making that work better, that's something that's really cool. So I think that's the part that's really the best part of public service. Yes, sir.
Hey, Congressman, I'm Ken Donovan. I work at the law school. I was curious what you think the odds are that we'll get either a DACA bill or a gun control bill through the House this month.
This month? None.
About a month left in DACA, right?
Yeah, well, I think we'll get DACA done. Well, I don't know, because here's what's happening with DACA. The president has insisted on pitting immigration groups against immigration groups, right? He's insisted on the DACA kids versus family reunification, which he likes to call chain migration, and diversity visas, which he likes to call lottery. The diversity visas are off the table as far as the Senate's concerned, right? They'll never get the 60 votes to do away with that program. And so it comes down to whether or not we can make a deal on family reunification. But in my view, there's no place to deal because he has exaggerated what you can do with family reunification. He would like you to believe that you can bring in your parents, lottie dottie, and every doggone body. But the reality is that you can't go that far, right? You get to, maybe a brother or a sister, that level. You don't get aunts, uncles, and cousins in. So, I don't know how much more you can restrict family reunification. But I'll say this. I would think that the DACA bill is coming along before a real gun safety legislation. But thank God for those kids in Florida. They're keeping it alive. Yes, ma'am. Hey, Miss Duval.
I've seen you work your magic with folks from across the aisle, and I'm just wondering if you have any tips for people in talking across difference. Kind of how do you find common ground with folks who may think differently from you on any number of political issues?
I think you pick your spots, and you just have to understand that the word compromise is not a bad word. It's the only way that a country this big and this diverse can ever work is that there's compromising going on. Obviously, you can't make everything happen, but you try to, first of all, you have to have some sort of relationship with the person on the other side. That goes beyond just being a legislator. For instance, Morgan Griffith and I have things in common, and he'll come and share books with me, and I'll share books with him. Morgan Griffith, if you don't know, is a congressman from the 9th Congressional District. Our service together started in the House of Delegates when I was in the majority and he was in the minority, and so we've had a chance to work back and forth together like that. And so that, helping somebody out when you're on top allows them to help you out when they're on top. And so it's that sort of thing. It's what you learned in kindergarten, playing nice with others. That's all it is. That's really all it is playing nice with others in the sandbox. Yes, sir. We'll go you and then you.
So my name is John Conde, sir. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. You're actually my congressman.
And you know that, right? I'm just saying.
And after I speak for a few minutes, you might remember me. So you were a pioneer in LGBT rights in Virginia. I remember lobbying you with Equality Virginia and the Richmond Organization for Sexual Minority Youth for years. And you, I believe you were my senator at the time, and Dolores McCoy was my delegate, and you were always at the forefront of the movement, willing to sponsor bills, and take a stand and come to the Equality Virginia receptions and speak to us. At a time where I feel like the Democratic Party was very fragmented on LGBT issues. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that, one. But also, how do you go about, more than just playing nice, really dealing with issues, contentious issues even within the Democratic Party itself?
Well, sometimes you have to be willing to be Wile E. Coyote and just run smack into that wall, but you'll leave an imprint, and eventually the wall will cave. And that's a lot what has happened with we like to say we evolved in Democratic Party politics, but that's a lot what happened in Democratic Party politics when it came to LGBTQ issues, is that people are willing to run into a wall and leave an imprint, and the wall eventually falls. And I think, you know, that's what I mean by picking your spots. Sometimes it's playing nice, and sometimes it's like, you know what? Go ahead, kill my bill, but I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go down dying a horrible, horrible death. But I'm going to, you know, you're going to know that I was here. Yes, sir.
My name is Bruce Newtovic. You briefly adverted to fundraising, which is unfortunately a huge part of our political life in this country. I was wondering how much of your time does that occupy, and how do you avoid allowing that to become a distraction or to influence you in the wrong sorts of ways?
Well, number one, we have, I'm getting ready to compare and contrast something. I'm going to try to get it right. In the federal system, we obviously have limits. And, you know, you can, if you're wealthy enough to do so, you can max out between you and your spouse at 10.8 to us. There's nobody on this planet that can buy me for $10,800. I am just not that cheap. Okay, that's number one. Number two, so you say, well, Donald, what about the General Assembly? Because, you know, Virginia's the wild, wild west of fundraising. There are no limits. You can take it from anybody as long as it's not a foreigner. There are practical limits in the General Assembly because nobody's giving out money like that. I mean, you don't see anybody outside of maybe a gubernatorial election stroking $100,000, $200,000 checks. And I would suggest even in that case, people's integrity is such that you just don't buy them off. The problem comes in, if there's a problem, it's not with the donations. It's whether or not that person who holds the office is financially sound enough to deal with the other temptations, right? Because, you know, if all of a sudden I need to get some, hey, you know what? I got to manage 2 homes now, right? I got to have a home in my district, and I got to have a home up in D.C. And and by the way, they just left me just outside my district, so I got to move into my district. Can anybody give me a good mortgage? You know, wink, wink, a good mortgage. That's the problem. And so you have to have folks who are financially sound enough to be able to resist that, right? Because I actually, when I described that problem, I actually had a mortgage lender say to me, well, you know, if you need some help, I'm like, nope, we're good, right? And he didn't mean anything nefarious, right? He was just being nice. But, you know, you have to be in a position to say, no, we're good, we're going to be all right. So I think that's more of the problem than the outright giving. Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming. This question is actually similar to Bruce. What do you say to the disheartened voter who feels as though their representative doesn't, you know, represent their interests, but instead represents, you know, the interests of the groups that fund your campaign?
Oh, and let me back up and get to that. You said how much of my day is. I probably do at least 2 hours of call time every day, just because there's so much money that has to be raised, and the dollar amounts are fairly small compared to how much you need. Well, first of all, I hope those folks are not my constituents who feel that way. But, you know, to be perfectly honest with you, what I would tell that person is you need to be more engaged and more active. Because invariably, that person that I have seen, now your experience may be different, but invariably that person I have seen has not joined a political committee, has not really participated in the election process, hasn't really volunteered for a campaign, hasn't been in the game. I usually tell folks that politics is a contact sport, and you have to stay in contact with us, whether it's by word or by campaign or by whatever. And so those folks who don't engage in the process, I think it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? They don't engage, they become disgruntled. They become disgruntled, they don't see any actions that they like, and then they stay disengaged. The one thing that I think, that I hope that you all will take away from this, and that the generations that follow you will take away from this, is that we can't afford to be disengaged anymore. You know, your group has to remain engaged in the process, no matter how cynical you may get, because look what happens when you're not engaged. This is what happens. This is what non-engagement looks like. This is the government you have in Washington is a result of not being engaged. Hillary got the same percentage of votes in every demographic category as Obama did. She just didn't have the turnout. Now, you can say that was because of Russian meddling, might have been. You can say that was because of the independent Green candidate, might have been. But we need to but there are a whole lot of people who sat on the sidelines. You know what, I'm sorry you didn't like Hillary, but you had a choice, you didn't make a choice, and this is what we get. You have to stay engaged.
Please join me in thanking Congressman.
Thank you.